Well, I owe you an apology. I remember recording these two videos in at the college and thought I had them posted, but clearly I did not get them posted. And you think I can find those copies now? Anyway, so here we are revisiting this material and hopefully so that I can get it recorded and posted this time. So just to recall where we're at, we just finished talking about uploading and downloading files in general, right? And staving them in the database as a way to actually then manage them with referential integrity and everything else. But now we're going to talk about a particular type of file, and that priority is often being able to view it, right? That is image files. And whenever we start talking about images, have you taken a close look at the kind of pictures your cell phone takes lately? Odds are they are huge images, right? So quite often to have practical use on the website, we need to be able to resize them. So this is just a little bit of preparation for dealing with images that is very, very important. Yeah? As you're going from big picture to little picture. Now, very rarely in a situation like this would I ever be concerned about taking an image and enlarging it in terms of how we actually store it in our system. But very often then we need to shrink them down, right? Now, of course, in certain applications, yeah, the whole idea is to preserve a full-size copy of the image, right? That's sometimes the point of it, but that's often not the case. If we're just looking at things like profile pictures, for example, that's not what we're really concerned about. Okay, so image file is so just a file, right? So the basic mechanics of uploading and downloading and everything else doesn't really change. It's what we do with it once we get it up there. That's what's going to be different, right? So in terms of the history of working with a tool like, as I have here, SkiaSharp, right? You may or may not have heard of Skia. Quite possibly you have, because it was originally developed, I guess, by a company back in early 2000s, bought by Google, right? And then eventually turned into a open source library, the Skia library using C++. And then a few years later, some clever folks put together the idea of a C# implementation of Skia, right? So that's exactly what we're going to use here, okay? So basically, it's just a matter of getting it in place and then using the capabilities that it offers to us in terms of image manipulation, right? All right, so that's what we're going to do next. So I'm just going to go into my project. Before I leave this note up here, though, I want to mention that, we're going to get comprehensive 2D image manipulation from using SkiaSharp. But something else we're going to do at the same time. It's not a right or wrong. Okay, it's a balance, as is so often things come down to a balancing act. If image processing obviously takes a little bit of time, right? If you're pulling up hundreds of records to show on the screen at once, well, to process all those images, let's face it, we store them in the database in a certain format, right? Basically as a byte array. So to get it ready to display on the screen, there's a little bit of processing or manipulation involved. So, there are times when we might say, well, gosh, for performance, I want to actually store the image so it's just ready to show, right? I don't have to want to take it out of the database, construct it as an image, and then manipulate it before I display it, right? So what we often end up deciding to do is we're going to store two copies, or let's say multiple copies of the same image, pre-sized for how we want them to appear on the screen. That can help performance when you're getting it out of the database and up to display, right? Obviously, the downside is you're increasing the volume it takes to store two copies of the same image, even if the one is a little thumbnail and not very big, right? So it's a trade-off. Maybe in one circumstance, you say, no, I'll just save the image in the database and then on the fly, resize it as I need for different situations, right? And that might be the most sufficient thing. But in my experience, for something that is going to be presented as like a profile picture, it often is worthwhile. After all, these days, database storage is relatively cheap. So until you run into a need to worry about optimizing the size of the database, I would go with an approach like this. Okay, so we're going to store two copies of the same image, basically pre-sized to how we want it to display, and that increases the performance of displaying the actual image, right? And then as I point out here, with both versions stored, right, as we load the parent object, okay, because it's a one-to-one relationship, but it's essentially a parent-child nonetheless, we can decide which one to include. Do we want a larger size or the tiny little thumbnail size version? And we don't get both in most cases, we just get one or the other. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So let me come into my project now. So here we are where we left it off after our file upload. So I'm going to need to do a couple things. I have to, as we said, come down into the NuGet Package Manager. I need to install that particular tool, right? So here I've got my little resize image text file that you could have downloaded from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is install package SkiaSharp. Now I don't particularly have to worry about about versions here at all. I can just get the latest version. Notice it's 3.119.1, right? And of course, I'll see that up here if I go to the project, right? And see all my basic Microsoft stuff here is all on the same version. But down here, I have my SkiaSharp in this particular version as well. Okay, so we're good. We're ready to go. So I'll just add the class, right? Click. We'll add our class here, our little utility, okay, for resizing the image itself. So it's going to be my resize image class. And there we go, a quick copy paste out of my attached text file, and we have our class in place. Now, as I say here, I kind of put this together from various ideas I found in different spots on the internet, okay? The idea as well is to maintain aspect ratio. So, how frustrating is it, you upload an image and you go to look at it and it's stretched tall so everyone looks really thin. Well, maybe that's complimentary for some of us, but, or it's squished short and everyone looks really fat. The idea is we want to maintain the aspect ratio unless you really need to do otherwise, but that's what I normally find myself doing, right? So what we're going to do is, of course, we'll basically be following the maximum height that we want to show, and the width will change to maintain the aspect ratio based on the maximum height, right? Now, of course, there's lots of image formats out there as well, but you may or may not be aware of WebP. WebP, open source now, but basically Google, once more, bought the company that developed this and has basically made it available to everyone out there on the internet. It's much more efficient. Right, smaller size, faster processing than many of the other images codexes out there. Right, so I notice I have a default method here set up to shrink image WebP. So as long as you're happy with the WebP, right, then all we really need is the byte array for the content, because we're not going to be doing anything with any other MIME types, just the image/WebP, and that's very quick and easy then. So yeah, I'm not going to walk through this code and try to explain it all. Hey, you can look at the documentation for SkiaSharp and see what's going on yourself. It's pretty straightforward here. We're just determining the right width and height that we want and so on and so forth. We basically use a canvas. We take the image as it comes. We write it on the canvas in the size that we want and basically prepare our new image data. And then we just do a to array to get the byte array for it, and away we go. Right? Just to mention as well, there might be circumstances where you say, you know what, I don't want that particular format. I specifically require a JPEG or a PNG or whatever, right? Well, in that case, I found it was easier to actually just create a simple little I'll call it a view model here, right? That contains our byte array as well, the content, as well as the MIME type, right? So we'll return an object if we need to use this little utility here in a different way. So it's basically the same idea, except we now can also pass a selected format. Now, I did set it up, okay, that our format defaults to WebP if you don't specify otherwise, and an image quality of 100. But if you want something else and you don't want 100% quality, then you have the option of using this approach. Just notice that it returns an object, right, of that view model type there. So other than that, it's basically the same. Of course, down here then, we're using a switch for the different image types that might have been requested, and away we go, right? So again, this is our default if we don't specify otherwise, but if you need a JPEG versus a PNG, bitmap, whatever, okay, you can get all these others using that version of our little utility here. And of course, we have defaults for the sizes as well, right? Notice that my default for the simple WebP version is a 75 by 90. All right. Okay, so we have our utility in place for resizing images. So now we'll get into the actual step 12 with our images itself. Oh, not step 12. I got the wrong one. Sorry, hang on. number 13, step 13, okay, for a picture, right? Okay, so as I said, we're going to deal with two copies. We're going to focus on a profile picture for the patient, right? We'll have a patient photo. Now, that is going to be a somewhat larger version. Now, obviously, probably much smaller than if you take out your cell phone and whip out and take a picture, right? I'm going to limit it to a 500 high by 600 pixel wide version, okay, of whatever the photo is that we upload. But we're also going to have a thumbnail. Oh, I've got a boo-boo here. Sorry, I should have changed this. It's not going to be 120 by 200. No. We are going to go with a 75 by 90, okay? 75 high by a maximum of 90 wide. Just a little bit smaller, okay? I found from experience, and that seems to work very well on the index view, which is where we're going to use it. And hey, the smaller it is, then the less data you have to shuffle around and so on and so forth. So we're going to shrink it down to that for our thumbnail version, right? As I mentioned, that's the one we're going to use on the actual index view itself, right? Because we have multiple records to display. We might have 5, 10, 20, who knows how many patients on each index view. Because of our paging, it's limited somewhat, but still multiple images will be shown. So a nice little wee thumbnail is perfect for that. However, on the views where we're focusing on one patient at a time, such as details and edit views and so on, that's where we'll use the larger version, our patient photo version, right? Now, just before I go on, I want to mention that we technically could use our uploaded file and file content classes, right? The same ones we use for Excel documents and things like that we upload, right? We could use them for our image as well. I mean, an image is still just a file, the same as those. But, okay, there's really no advantage. We don't save room by storing it that way, okay? And there's no other advantages I could think of. And it can make things more complicated, right? We're reusing the classes. Sometimes it's nice to have a class set aside specifically for the use that you have for it, right? So we're going to make two classes, okay? One to hold each copy of the image. That way, we can just include the size we want when we go to display it, right? So if I'm pulling patient and I want to include the thumbnail version because I'm going to do it on an index, then that's what I include. If it's the details view, I include the patient photo instead, right? So it makes the implementation very clean, right? And we're less likely to get ourselves confused and make any mistakes, right? Also a point here before I go on, we don't need to offload that byte array like we did. Remember, that's what the file content was. It was basically the byte array moved out of the uploaded file, so we could include it when we wanted to, okay? Or just get a whole list of uploaded files if we just needed like a list of file names and things like that, right? Well, you know what? We're never going to actually need the image unless we want to show the image, right? So in this case, there's no point in shuffling the byte array out of the class and putting it in a dependent class, right? So I will have two versions here, my photo and my thumbnail, and you'll notice, if you look carefully, they're identical, all the properties in them. It's just this way I can just load one versus the other, right, as the circumstance requires. So let me get those in place here. Okay, so here I have my patient thumbnail and my patient photo. As I said, they're the same, right? But along with that then, what we're going to do is we have to add the properties to patient. So let's come into our actual patient class. And I'm going to, because it's essentially one-to-one here, it makes it pretty straightforward. I'll come down fairly near the bottom. Before I get into foreign keys, I find usually works well. Maybe right after the row version, I'll put it, right? Here we have my patient photo, nullable, because I don't have to be including it. Same with the thumbnail. And normally I'll just have one or the other when I go and actually get the patient from the database, right? But of course, we do need to have some DB sets for this as well. So let's come now to our data context, and I'll add my two DB sets here. Getting quite a list. I should fix my separation here, maybe. Why not, before I go on? Just so that it looks all the same. Okay. Now we're going to have to make a new migration as well, right? So I'll just pause while I do that. Okay, just pulling up my common commands here. Add migration for my medical office context. I'll just call it patient pics. And away we go. And actually, I'm pretty sure I can get away with this one because I'm just adding new properties, right? I'm not modifying anything. So yeah, I should be able to add yet another migration here. So we've got quite a few in a row. That's good. That's nothing wrong with that. But again, feel free at any time to just start a fresh set of migrations over if you so desire. Okay. Now you might say, wait a second, what about cascade delete? We didn't make any changes to our Fluent API for that, but you know what? By default, we have our normal cascade, which is what we would want. So in other words, if you delete a patient, it will automatically go in and delete both the patient photo and patient thumbnail out of the system. All right, good. Okay, so next time we run, it'll actually apply all our migrations. All I have to do to make sure that happens for certainty is I'll just come in here to my program.cs. I'll tell it to definitely delete the database, and then we'll use migrations and we'll seed sample data. That way, everything will be up to snuff and we'll be good to go. All right. Okay. Now, I've got everything in place here. So let me just clean up the screen a little bit. Let me just close all my tabs. Let's come down now into, I could start with the controller or the views. I think for a change, I'm going to start in the views. So coming there, right here in views, and we'll go to the patient. So let's start with the create view. All right. Now, one of the first things we're going to have to do, and you know what? I emphasize this over and over again, but it's commonly one of the easiest things for students to forget to do. Not just students, easiest thing for me to forget to do too. Okay, I'll be honest, okay? If you get all your other code in place and you go to say, hey, I've selected the picture, I've got everything to manage it and get it saved to the database and everything else, why don't I have any profile pictures for my patients? It's probably because of this. You forgot this one little thing. Go to your opening form tag. We need method post, enclosure type multi-part form data. Without that, the actual data, okay, from this object that we have inside of our form will not get uploaded. Nothing warns you. Okay, you just don't get the data, right? You can set a breakpoint and see that your data isn't coming through, but other than that, okay, that's the most common little boo-boo to make. All right, now we're going to add a form group as well, okay? Now where I put it, it doesn't matter too much. Maybe I'll put it at the top of the second column, right? That's fine. It doesn't make a huge difference. You and your client can decide where you like it arranged inside the form, or you can choose yourself. But here I'm just going to put another form group. Label is picture file. Notice the input is type equals file. Okay. Now I'm selecting one, so I don't have multiple, right? So I just have the name is the picture. I set that myself. If I want to use something else, I'll use it. Okay. And ID the picture, right? So that's good. So that'll allow me now to select a picture when I'm creating a patient. Okay. Now, let's deal with some other views. So on the index view, right, I'm going to want to show thumbnail versions of the picture for each patient. So let me come down here where the data starts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new, I find it works best at the left, so I'm going to make a new column, right, right here, okay, before the actual patient name, right? So I'll make the table empty table heading tag here, and then for the table data tag inside the, basically the for each loop where I build each row, right, inside the row, this is the code I'm going to put for a table data tag, right? And I'll just have some logic here. I'll make sure they actually have a thumbnail because not every patient will have a profile picture saved, right? So if the content is not equal to null, then hey, I have a thumbnail version of this image to display, right? So what's involved in displaying it? Well, really, it's surprisingly simple. We go into the, we go into the patient, the item is the patient, we go into the thumbnail, which hopefully we've loaded, okay, with our include in our link query, and I grab the content, right? Now I do have to convert it to a base 64 string, and I store that here, and then I use that, okay? The image source has a particular format, right? So I'm going to use string.format to make sure we have it right, okay? It has data, colon, and then the MIME type, a semicolon, and then as a base 64 string, we specify that that's the format we're using. We provide our actual content, right? That converted to base 64 string, the content itself, right? And that is our image source. So I just have a simple image tag. That's the image source. So it's hard-coded right in the HTML of the page. You might think, oh, that's so much data to download. Truth is, the data's got to get in the page one way or the other. And this doesn't take up any more room than if it just goes and gets it in a later request, right? So it really isn't a big deal. All right, so we'll provide some title here, profile picture of, so that when you hover over it, you can see that. The alt text is there as well. Away we go. Okay, so that's good. We actually have our ready to display it. Now let's come to the details and delete views, right? Okay, so let's come there next. So details and delete. What I'm going to do here is I want to show a larger version, okay? And I'll put it above the description list altogether. So right under the horizontal rule, okay, I'm going to throw in this code, which is basically the same idea, right? But notice we have our patient photo instead. It's the larger version. So we get the content, build our image source, away we go, bada bing, bada boom, right? And I'll throw another horizontal rule underneath the image, and that's it. Okay, so that can be the same on delete, same with details, right? Not sure why I have that blank line. Doesn't hurt, but I can take it out. There we go. All right, exact same code in both of those. So that's index, details, and delete all taken care of. Okay, and we started off with create. So the only one I have left is edit. Edit's going to be similar to create. So once more, don't forget, okay, our multi-part form data, our enclosure type, otherwise, okay, because we might want to change the picture. We might want to change the picture, okay? So we need to be able to upload a new picture, in which case we need our multi-part form data enclosure type specification in the opening form tag. All right. So coming down here, what I'm going to do is before even the form, right, under the horizontal rule, this is quite similar, I confess, to what we did on the last two views as well, okay? First of all, I found it was good to actually get a Boolean in place, okay, has picture, right? Because we're going to need it multiple times, so rather than do the test more than once, I'll just store it in a simple Boolean. If we have a picture, then, there you go, okay? We go to our model, our patient photo, into the content, convert to our base 64 string, away we go, bada bing, bada boom, and that's good, right? So we have everything in place here, we have our image, and away we go, right? Good, okay. But further down, right? So maybe I'll do it in the same thing. I'll do it at the top of the second column, okay? Actually, no, I apologize. I'm going to put it right near the top here before, sorry, I will do something there later, but I got ahead of myself, right? So right at the top before my actual row where I start showing data. Here I'm going to throw in a div because what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a checkbox. Now visually it'll look like it's right underneath this horizontal rule below the picture. The next thing you're going to see is a checkbox, right? But it has to be inside the form because it needs to be inside the data that gets submitted to the controller, right? So I couldn't leave it up here, even though logically it would look right there. And I find that this is the best arrangement in my experience, right? If we have a picture, then I'm going to have a little row here, its own row, okay, where we just have a checkbox to remove the image. Check to remove image, and that's that. All right. Then we start, okay, the actual row itself. Okay. Then, back where I said I was going to do some work, okay, top of the second column, what I'll do here is throw in a chance to replace the picture file, right? So basically it's the same idea. It'll be called the picture once again, ID the picture, and I will allow you to pick a new picture to upload, and it will just replace the current profile picture of the patient itself. And that finishes the work we have to do in all of our views. All right, so let's come now to the controller. So coming to our patient controller, okay, there's a few things to do here, right? All right, now, remember, of course, these are objects contained inside the patient, right? So we always need to be thinking about the fact that when we save our patient object, we want it to save our pictures along with it. So that's going to be a transaction, right? And we have to worry about retry limit exceeded exceptions in that case. Now, fortunately, we already have them everywhere, right? So it won't be an issue, but it's something to always think about. If you're starting off with a simpler controller, you don't already have that transaction situation dealt with, then you have to worry about adding a catch block for retry limit exceeded exceptions. Okay. All right. So let's start worrying about our queries here. So let's come down in the index view. Here's the actual query where we're going and getting our patient. So what do we want to include here? We want to include the thumbnail, right? Doesn't matter where I put it in the order here in these includes, so I'll just throw it right there. Include the patient thumbnail, right? Now, for both the details, actually all three, details, delete, and the get for edit, actually both edits, technically speaking, right? We need to do the include, but in this case, the actual larger version, the photo. So we'll do them one at a time, right? We don't do it here. Actually, I'll come back to the create and the edit later. Let's skip over them for now. I should have done Control-MO, shrunk everything down, but here we are, delete, right? If we're going to actually show the picture here, then we need the patient photo there, and we'll do the same thing here as well. Okay. All right. Now we'll go back and we will have a look at the actual action arguments, but we know that we're going to have to do some processing, right? It's one thing to get the picture uploaded, but I've already talked about the fact that we want to do some work resizing it and everything else. So let me just save everything so far. Go Control-MO in here because I should have done that earlier. We have so much code in this controller now, I don't want to get lost myself going back and forth. What we're going to do is we're going to add a little method here. Okay, it'll be a private method, right? Just let me get my code. Since it's private, I can just throw it right down here, and away we go. All right. It's going to be called add picture. We're going to pass in the patient, okay, and we're going to pass in the actual picture itself. Now, the picture is a iForm file. That is how it comes from the controller, sorry, from the view into the controller. Okay, we'll add that to our parameters that we look for in our post actions up further on, right? So we're going to get the picture in this format. It's an iForm file, right? That implementing that interface. Okay. So we're going to get the picture and save it with the patient in the two different sizes. So a quick check, okay, maybe they didn't upload a picture. Well, that's it. Our job is done. So we just skip over everything else in here, right? It's just a way to double check and make sure we aren't trying to do work when we don't actually have a picture, right? So what do? From the iForm file itself, from the uploaded picture, we grab the content type, and that gives us our MIME type, okay? We can check the length, and these are a good way to make sure that we actually have a legitimate file. They might have selected something, but it's not anything legitimate, right? So it gives us the chance to do another if. If the MIME type is blank and the file length is 0, okay, then forget it. There's nothing to work with here. But as long as both of them, okay, look legitimate, then we'll come into this if, right? Here's a further test. Somewhere, I mean, as we saw, there's like a dozen different MIME types out there for images, and the list is growing. But each and every one has something in common. The letters for the word image are contained somewhere inside the MIME type for all of the image types, right? So here's another if. If MIME type contains image in there somewhere, right, then okay, then I'm very confident that we actually have something we can work with, right? So I prepare a new memory stream, okay, and I go to my iForm file, my picture, copy asynchronously to my memory stream, right? And that gives me this memory stream. I can go .to array, and guess what that gives me, right? A byte array, right? That's where we get it from. Okay. Now, we have to be concerned, are we replacing or creating a new, right? So if the patient photo isn't null, okay, then we're replacing the current picture of the patient. Now, if I was paranoid, I could check both the patient photo and the thumbnail, but because I'm in charge and I'm always managing both at the same time, the photo and the thumbnail version, I'm content with just doing this one check. So if the photo is not equal to null, then we already have pictures, okay, for both, so we're going to replace the byte array, right? So the patient photo, I check the content, I update the content, calling my ResizeImage utility, shrinking it to my WebP. I pass the picture array that I got my byte array from up there to the size I want, 500 by 600, right? There we go. Now, we can't update the thumbnail, right, unless we actually have it. And since by default we don't, okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get the patient thumbnail itself. I have to add that into the patient object so that I can then work with it, okay? So then I set the content of my patient thumbnail to the version that is 75 by 90. There we go. All right. So that basically replaces the current photo and thumbnail of the patient themselves. Okay. Else, there are no pictures, so we're going to start new. So I just basically new up my patient photo, shrinking the image to the right size, adding it to the patient, new up a patient thumbnail, okay, shrinking it to the right size, and adding it as the patient thumbnail. So I have both objects added to the patient, and that's it. That's all I have to do, because then when I save the patient object itself, it'll create all the transactions necessary to update everything in the database appropriately. Whew, excellent. Now let's go back and revisit our create and our edit process, right? So I've got everything shrunk down, which is good. So let's come up here to the create. Okay, now the first thing I need to do is add the parameter, right, to grab the data for the image itself. I'm kind of running out of room here, so let me press enter here, bring this down, right? Might as well expand this. And I will put in here, comma, iForm file. Remember, we only get one, okay, so I don't have to worry about having anything else, just a single iForm file, nullable, of course, the picture, right? Okay. Then we come down here where we check if model state is valid. So we have a valid, we aren't returning to the screen, right? Then what I'm going to do is add the code here, right? So if the picture is not null, I'll simply call my add picture method, okay, asynchronously, of course, right? And that's it, okay? I can do it on one line if I'm feeling lazy. So if the picture is not equal to null, then I will await, call my add picture method, okay, passing the patient and the picture that was uploaded right there. Okay, and finally, all right, and that takes care of that. Now double check, I already have it here, but remember I mentioned we have to make sure we have a catch for the retry limit, because we will definitely be looking at, in this case, a multiple stage transaction to get all the everything we've added to the patient saved, right? Okay. So now we're ready to go on to the edit post. So once more, the first thing we have to do is add the parameter, but not just one. Remember, we also added a checkbox here, right? A check to remove the image. So the user has the option of saying, no, I just want to remove the image. I'm not replacing it with a new one. I just want to remove it, right? So that's one parameter, and the other parameter is once more our nullable iForm file, right, for a new image if we're actually replacing it. Okay, so. Oh, now you see, if I was doing this live in front of the class, somebody would have put up their hand and said, Dave, you're being an idiot. Because, of course, I put this in the wrong place altogether, right? This is the get, okay? I need the post for edit, right? So here is where I would add that. Maybe I'll push enter here to make sure everything stays on the screen. There, I add my nullable string for the checkbox to remove image and my iForm file. Okay, now I'm in the right area. Sorry about that. I don't know what I was thinking, but hey, there you go. That's what I get for trying to talk and think at the same time. So I can come down here. Everything is fine up to this point. I come into my try. Okay, so we've already checked for the our try update model. We're in here, so I have my try catch, right? So before we call save changes, I have basically the same code would almost do it, except I have one more issue to deal with, and that's removing the image, right? So if check remove image is not equal to null, then we're just deleting, but we have to delete both versions of the photo, right? So we have to make sure that the change tracker knows about them both, right? So we have to go get the thumbnail since we didn't include it. Remember, we're in the edit here, so we already have the larger side, the patient photo that was added. That was in the link query to go and get the patient in the first place, right? But it would not have included the thumbnail. So I have to go to my contacts, to patient thumbnails, where the patient ID matches my patient update, and that will get my patient thumbnail, which then I load into that property of my patient update. Okay, then setting them both to null will, when I save the patient update back to the database, will delete them, right? So all I have to do is, okay, I have to make sure it's added so the change tracker knows that this is a change. Setting them both to null means that when we save the patient update, they will get removed. The else is the same line of code we had in our create. Okay, as long as we actually have the picture, we'll just call add picture and it will add it to the patient, and away we go. And believe it or not, that should be it. Let's just run it and see the effect. And hopefully this goes well. Okay, we are running, are we? I think we are. Where am I? Okay, homepage. Okay, there we go. So I come to patients. Now I don't see anything yet, right? But if I click edit, it's easier to show you in edit. I can just picture file, choose file, and let's just go to a picture file. Hang on a second. Okay, I'll just pick an image file I have here, and there we go. I'll click save, and there is my patient image. Now, when I click edit, oops, wah, 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 wah. See, that's what I get for not following my actual instructions, right? Yes, I forgot to just add the include here. So in the edit get, I have to have the include there. Let me just check. Oh, I'll need it here as well. See, that's why I skipped over the create and edit, but then when I was adding the includes, and I forgot to go back. So let me just make sure here in the post. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm good. Yeah. Okay. Let me just do a hot reload, and hopefully things will go well here. There we are. All right. So there, I'm editing my patient now. Notice I can check to remove image, right? Click save, and there it is gone. Or if I go back in again, choose file. I'm going to pick a different file. There's my Bugs Bunny. When I go edit, I say, oh, I picked the wrong one. Choose file. And yeah, I'll go back to my Barney. Save. And then away we go. All right. And it works the same in the create. Okay, I can choose my file here as well, but I'm not going to take time to go through the whole create process and fill everything out, right? So yeah, you can see how it works. So it's the same with details, and even on delete. Okay, I have the image there, so I can, oh, that's definitely the one I want to delete, and away we go. All righty. Hopefully you'll find that interesting and maybe even a little bit helpful and maybe even a little bit fun.